These days I'm lucky enough to have subscribers all over the world, and obviously not all of you celebrate Christmas, but many of you do, so I thought it would be cool to do a Christmas themed tutorial. What I want to do is think about a problem that piano players often face at Christmas. You need to play some Christmas carols or songs, maybe you've got a Christmas Day family sing-along or something, but the Christmas carol sheet music that you've got isn't ideal for what you need to do. That might be because it looks something like this. A lot of the books of Christmas music you buy in music stores contain these heavily simplified arrangements that are really pretty boring. Yeah, sometimes, as is the case here, these things also come with simplified chords written in for guitarists to kind of strum along. So, as a kind of Christmas freebie, I've created a fairly easy but piano-friendly set of arrangements of 4 Christmas carols that you can download as a PDF and play around with. The link is right underneath this video. What I'm going to do now is look at one of them in detail and explain how I've gone from the basic melody and chords to the full piano arrangement that people can sing along to. That way, hopefully, you can take these ideas that I'm going to show you and make your own arrangements of other Christmas carols. Okay, so for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm assuming that you can read basic piano music, though nothing very complicated, and that you have a basic knowledge of chords. I'm going to be bending a few things and simplifying a few rules along the way, but this is basically a kind of quick and dirty way of getting the job done, so you've got something that sounds pretty cool when you sit down at the piano on Christmas Day, and something that encourages your friends and family to really sing up and enjoy themselves. The carol that I'm going to look at in detail is the first one in the PDF, While Shepherds Watch Their Flocks by Night, which is pretty straightforward and short. Let me just play through the arrangement that I've come up with. You might like to have the PDF open and follow along in the score as I play. Here we go. So the very first thing I did to get to that arrangement was work up a version of the melody and chords just using regular pop chord notation that I was kind of happy with, something that we would call a lead sheet. Now, picking out a melody on the piano isn't that hard if you use a bit of trial and error. If you're unsure how to work out chords, however, that takes a little bit more practice, but do check out my tutorial on working out the chords to a song, which will at least get you started. I'll put a link in the list underneath this video. Of course, if you've already got a simplified version of the music, like the one we looked at earlier, then you might already have some chords, but just do be aware that they might be a simplified form of the chords. Now, before we get back to talking about chords, I just want to mention the issue of key, because we want to choose a good key, one that doesn't go too high or too low for people to sing. And we've got to bear in mind that we're probably dealing with singers who aren't that used to singing. Now, ideally, and this isn't always possible, but ideally, we're looking at a lower limit of middle C, maybe a little bit lower than that, and an upper limit of the D above middle C. The D above the C above middle C. Okay, so that kind of range. Men will actually sing an octave lower than that, but it's always scored in that range. So the key I've gone for is F major, which is the same as my cheapo simplified version that I played through earlier. It's also the same key that you'll find the carol in the hymn books. So if you've got a copy of something like Hymns Ancient and Modern with the scores, just check in there to see what the editors of those editions have done. You might even find a decent playable piano arrangement in there. Usually not, because the scores in hymn books are actually, tends to be chorale scores designed around voices rather than keyboard instruments. But you can go and look at those things and pick up some good clues. Anyway, back to my lead sheet. Let me just play it through slowly, and I'll play the melody in the right hand and just the chords as block chords in the left. Here we go. thing I really want you to notice there is those chords, yeah? Just look at how many of them there are. Let me play the tune again and shout out the changes. Yeah, I might get a bit boggled by this, but I'll take it fairly slowly and see if I can do it. Here we go. We start on a chord of F. F. C, D minor, B flat, F, C, F, C, G7, C, F, B flat, F, B flat, F, C, D minor, A, F, C, D minor, B flat, C, F. Yeah? Can you see how many more chords there are than in my pretend music store arrangement that I played right at the start of the tutorial? Yeah? So there's the lead sheet from which I've just played. Yeah? So have a look at that. And there's the mocked up music store arrangement. That difference is really, really important because, as I just said a minute or two ago, these simplified arrangements and simplified chords can be quite misleading. Okay, herein lies a really, really important point about harmony. If you're used to playing relatively modern songs on the piano, then you might be surprised by the amount of chord changes that happen in a Christmas carol, or indeed in any traditional hymn that you play. If you look at the chords to a pop song or a show tune or a jazz standard or whatever, you'll usually find the chords changing maybe once a bar or twice a bar. But in Shepherd's Watched, it's often much more than that. Now, there's a whole bunch of reasons for that I won't dig into here, but in general, when you're working out the harmony for a hymn or a carol, assume there are more chord changes. Yeah, massive oversimplification, but just assume more chord changes. More melody notes belong to a chords and fewer notes are passing notes than in a pop song. Yeah, as I say, a massive oversimplification. Anyone with any kind of high-level musical training is sort of slapping their head against the desk as I say that, but it's the simplest way to put it. So the first thing you can do to help yourself make a Christmas carol sound as it should do is simply to put in more chord changes. Generally, and this is the upside, generally you'll be dealing with simple chords. There won't be like C minor ninth and stuff in there. There's nothing much more complicated than a dominant seventh. Yeah, the most complex chord in that arrangement is a G7. Maybe the occasional diminished chord, but nothing fancy. Okay. Let me demonstrate one more time. Here's while Shepherd's Watched with those simplified chords that I played at the start, if I can just find them. Yeah, this is my simplified music store arrangement. I'll shout out the chords. F, B flat, F, F, C, B flat, C, B flat, C, F. Okay, really simple and straightforward. And here's my lead sheet. F, C, D minor, B flat, F, C, F, C, G7, C, F, B flat, F, B flat, F, C, D minor, A, F, C, D minor, B flat, E. Sorry, C, F. Yeah, lots more chords. Really, really important point to make. Okay, let's go back to the piano version that I created. So why is it like that, and how did I get from the basic tune and chords in my lead sheet to the piano version? Let me take you through the process I used. The very first thing I'm thinking about is that I'm writing for singers who aren't necessarily particularly great or particularly experienced. It's like Grandma and Cousin Gary who only ever sing at weddings and at funerals and at Christmas. So I'm making sure that the tune in the right hand is good and clear and not at all cluttered up with lots of fancy cross rhythms, yeah? Stuff like expression and musical quality is still important, but more important is supporting the singers, because inexperienced singers get confused really, really easily. Excuse me. So what I'm doing is creating this good, really sort of blocky right hand, really filling out the melody with chord notes. I'm not worrying too much about smooth legato playing. That doesn't mean that I'm playing a full block chord with every note of the melody, but for the most part I'm keeping that right hand pretty chunky. When I'm playing that, I'm going to be making sure that the top note of those chords, which is always the melody note, is ringing out nice and clear for the singers to follow. So I've got something that, yes, can be quite quiet and restrained if necessary, but which I can really bash out if I want to. Inexperienced singers don't like to stand out or use their initiative. So if you play a kind of weedy piano part, you're likely to get a weedy, hesitant, unconfident sound from your singers. And that's why those cheap music shop arrangements are so poor. Yeah, people don't like singing along to them. The thing to do is to create a bit of a wall of sound that carries people along and encourages them to sing out. Importantly, you also need to play confidently to instill some confidence in them. This isn't the sort of playing where you can be indecisive. So that's another important point. Bashing on through confidently is more important than getting every single note right. If you make a mistake, ignore it, don't break time, just grind on through. Another quick thing to say is to watch out for your fingering. Although you have to jump about quite a bit here, there are relatively easy ways of fingering the chords to make them flow as smoothly as possible in the right. For example, between the C and D minor chords at the end of bar 1, you can actually jump fairly smoothly there. I haven't written any fingering in the scores because mostly I think the fingers are fairly obvious, but do give it a bit of thought. Now if we look at the left hand, you might notice that I'm sometimes mixing and matching my inversions of these chords, using a note other than the note the chord is named after in the bass. This is really common in carol and hymn writing, and again there are lots of kind of rules and guidelines that steer composers towards their choice of bass notes. In chorale type music like this, it's usually to do with creating a natural singable line for the bass singers in a choir to follow, and also to do with avoiding voice leading problems like parallel fifths and such like, which you might have come across if you've ever done any music theory, but not something we need to worry about here. All that stuff is beyond the scope of this tutorial. What I would say to you is, when you're creating your own arrangements, try to put together a firm, flowing, natural sounding bass line and play around with different chord notes in the bass for particular chords. This is my bass line just for the first sort of 4 bars. Okay, so something that is a little bit jumpy but also has a bit of flow and also a little bit of variation, okay, as you can see in the second beat of bar 2 there, okay. What I've done mostly, obviously, is gone from octaves in the left hand because that gives me a firm and clear bass line, There's one occasion just in the penultimate bar where I've used an arpeggiation, okay. There were a couple of optional arpeggiations earlier, but in that last bar, I've kind of thrown that in as a necessary one for you to play as a bit of practice. Okay, basically you just play it like that with the 2 notes stuck together with the pedal. As I say, once or twice I've added a bit of interest with some quick quavers, as in the second bar, but mostly it's just those octaves. Now that's useful to bear in mind if you're working on your own arrangements, because those blocky, solid octaves, they're not exactly glamorous, but they do give you a good, solid grounding for your playing. And being solid and grounded is, as I say, about it's what we're all about here, because we need to support our singers with that, as I say, wall of sound. You might also have noticed that I'm using the sustain pedal pretty extensively. Now if you're playing pop or jazz or whatever and you're using the pedal, you can often just get away with pedaling once or twice in a bar because chord changes aren't necessarily that frequent. Here though, there are a lot of chord changes and you don't want to pedal through all those chord changes because you're going to end up with a horrible mushy mess. So you're going to be pedaling more frequently. Now, it's important to understand that the sustain pedal is basically doing two jobs here. First of all, it's kind of smoothing out the melodic line, giving it a feeling of smoothness and flow, or as close as we can get to it with all this jumping around between chords. But it's also helping to give the whole performance more presence, a kind of richer, more reverberant sound, something that's helping us to create that wall of sound that I was talking about, that's going to give more confidence and more support to our amateur, our unconfident singers. Now, actually getting the pedalling right will take a bit of trial and error, and it can depend on your piano because different pianos have different pedalling characteristics. But what I'm doing is pedaling on each chord change, and giving the pedal a kind of quick lift and immediate push back down again, immediately before or even slightly on the chord change. It's a really quick movement, but what I'll do is just play through the first 4 bars and sit back a little, so hopefully you can see what my leg's doing. I might also tap a bit on the pedal so you can hear what's happening. Here goes, just the first 4 bars. Okay, as you can probably hear and hopefully see, much more going on there. Don't worry if you can't get the pedalling perfect. As with the note, it is more important just to bash on through and to give your singers that kind of confidence and support that they need. But if you can, just give a little bit of extra thought and bear in mind that it's probably different from the kind of pedalling that you're used to. Okay, so there we go. Hopefully that's given you a few tips and insights that should help you turn in a decent performance on Christmas Day. Remember, the PDF download link is underneath this video, so download those 4 carols and have a go at them, have a go at some of your own. Remember also to check out my book, How to Really Play the Piano, full of really useful stuff if you're learning about chords and improvisation and so on. Do subscribe to my channel. Click the link in the bottom right hand corner of the video screen to do that, and like and share this video if you've enjoyed it. You could even follow me on Twitter if you like, twitter.com/Bill Hilton. Okay, there are a few more tutorials coming out in the run up to Christmas, including the 4th instalment in the Jazz Piano for Beginners series, and maybe a couple of other things. There's quite a lot on at the moment. I'll be pretty ready for Christmas Day myself. Okay, there we go. Hope that was useful. I'll see you again soon.